The living room was quiet except for the low hum of the television. I sat in my usual spot on the couch, one hand resting on my knee, the other holding the remote loosely. A plate with the remains of my dinner sat untouched on the coffee table. My eyes were on the screen, but my mind wasn't focused. I had watched the show so many times before that the formula was predictable: guest introductions, polite banter, a few controversial topics to keep viewers engaged, and then a light-hearted ending to wrap things up. I didn't particularly care for talk shows, but Lisa worked on this one. She had been a segment producer for the Daniel Carter Show for almost 4 years now. Every evening, as she rushed out the door for the live broadcast, she'd tell me about the topics they'd cover. She was passionate about her job. She loved the energy of live television, the chaos of the control room, the fast-paced decisions. I admired that about her. Or at least, I used to. Lately, something had changed. Lisa had been spending more and more time at the studio, often coming home hours after the show ended. At first, it made sense: live television was unpredictable, and post-show meetings were common. But then the excuses started. Technical issues, long debrief, a last-minute rewrite for tomorrow's segment. Always something. She had become more protective of her phone too. It wasn't obvious, but I noticed. The way she tilted the screen away when she texted. How she kept her notifications on silent when she was home. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was overthinking it. But tonight, something felt different. As I watched the screen, Daniel Carter leaned back in his chair, flashing his signature smile. He was good at what he did, his confidence effortless, his charm smooth. Women loved him, and he knew it. The final segment was wrapping up. He thanked the audience, and the credits began rolling. Normally, the screen would fade to black within seconds. But something went wrong. The live feed was still on. At first, I barely noticed. I reached for the remote, ready to turn off the TV, when I saw movement on the screen. Lisa walked onto the set. I frowned. She never appeared on camera. As a producer, she worked behind the scenes. Seeing her step into the frame was unusual. Then she smiled. Not a polite, professional smile, but something softer. She walked toward Daniel. Then she ran. Straight into his arms. My stomach twisted. Daniel didn't hesitate. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, his hands resting on the small of her back. His fingers pressed into the fabric of her dress, too familiar, too comfortable. She didn't pull away. She tilted her head up, and he leaned down, whispering something into her ear. She laughed. A sound I hadn't heard in a long time. Not with me. I felt my body go rigid. My fingers tightened around the remote, my knuckles turning white. Lisa was still smiling, still nestled against him, completely unaware that the cameras were still rolling. Then the screen cut to black. The station had realized their mistake. But it was too late. I had seen everything. For a long time, I didn't move. The room around me faded. The sounds of the city outside, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock on the wall, none of it registered. I replayed the scene in my head, over and over. The way she looked at him. The way she held him. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a casual hug between colleagues. This was something else. A cold, steady rage spread through my chest. I reached for my phone. My fingers hovered over Lisa's contact. I could call her. Demand an explanation. Ask why my wife was in another man's arms when she was supposed to be at work. But I didn't. I set the phone down. I wasn't going to do this over the phone. She would come home tonight, thinking everything was normal. Thinking I was still the trusting husband who never questioned her late nights and work excuses. She was wrong. I sat back, exhaling slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. She was going to walk through that door, and I was going to look her in the eyes. And for the first time in our marriage, she was going to tell me the truth. The clock on the wall read 11:17 p.m. Lisa still wasn't home. She usually got back around this time on regular worknights, though lately, regular hadn't meant much. I sat in the darkened living room, the only light coming from the muted television screen. My hands rested on my knees, steady but tense. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't in denial. I knew exactly what I saw. Lisa, my wife, the woman I had trusted for years, had run into another man's arms without hesitation. She hadn't looked around to check if anyone was watching. She hadn't hesitated, hadn't second-guessed herself. It had been natural for her, like it was something she had done 100 times before. I reached for the remote, pressing the button to replay the recorded episode. I watched it again, fast-forwarding to the end. I needed to be sure. The final segment played. Daniel Carter leaned back in his chair, thanking the audience with that same polished smile. The credits started rolling. Then, the camera lingered, staying live for a few extra seconds. Lisa walked onto the set. She wasn't nervous or cautious. She didn't check to see if the cameras were off. She wasn't playing a role. This was real. She ran into his arms. I paused the video. Her expression was unmistakable. Happy. Comfortable. Not the face of someone who had made a mistake or acted in a moment of weakness. No, this was practiced. Familiar. The warmth that used to be in our marriage, the easy affection we once had, it was right there on the screen. Just not with me. I let the recording play out, watching as Daniel's hand slid lower on her back, watching as she whispered something to him that made him smirk. Then, the abrupt cut to black. The moment they realized their mistake. I exhaled slowly and turned off the TV. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from Lisa. Leaving now. See you soon. Love you. I stared at the words on the screen. Love you. I didn't reply. I placed the phone back on the table, leaning forward, resting my elbows on my knees. My pulse was slow, steady. I wasn't going to yell when she walked through the door. I wasn't going to let emotion cloud this. Lisa was about to walk into something she wasn't expecting. I heard the familiar sound of her car pulling into the driveway. A minute later, the key turned in the lock, and she stepped inside. Hey, she called out casually, dropping her purse on the entryway table. She walked in, stopping when she saw me sitting there in the dark. She tilted her head slightly. Why are you sitting in the dark? I didn't answer right away. I just watched her. She was dressed nicely, nothing out of the ordinary for work, but I saw the details now. The extra care in her appearance, the effort she put into looking perfect before she left the house every night. I had been blind to it before. She let out a small laugh, but it was uneasy. All right, what's going on? I gestured to the couch. Sit. She hesitated. Why? I didn't repeat myself. She slowly walked over and sat across from me, crossing her legs, trying to act normal. You're acting weird, she said, giving me a small smile. Did something happen? I leaned forward, resting my forearms on my knees. I watched your show tonight. She relaxed slightly. Oh, yeah? What did you think? I studied her carefully. It was interesting. Her expression remained neutral, but I noticed the slight shift in her posture. She was good at controlling her reactions, but not good enough. Yeah, she said. Anything stand out? I nodded. The ending. She frowned. The ending? I reached for the remote and turned the TV back on. The screen flickered to life, and I pressed play. The recorded episode resumed, and I skipped straight to the moment that mattered. The moment after the credits started rolling. Lisa turned toward the screen, watching. And then she saw it. Her body tensed. Her eyes widened slightly. On the screen, she walked toward Daniel. She ran into his arms. The same smile, the same touch, the same intimacy. Then, the screen went black. I grabbed the remote and paused it. Then I turned back to Lisa. She didn't say anything. She just stared at the screen, her mouth slightly open, as if her mind was still trying to process what had just happened. I let the silence stretch. Then I spoke. "Do you have anything you want to say?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. She swallowed, glancing at me, then back at the TV. I watched as she tried to come up with an explanation. Then, she did what I expected. "That's not what it looks like," she said quickly. I didn't react. "Then explain it to me." She opened her mouth, then hesitated. I could see her brain working, trying to come up with something believable. It's not what you think." I tilted my head slightly. "What do I think?" She let out a shaky breath. "It was nothing." I nodded slowly. "Nothing." "Yes," she said, her voice gaining a little more confidence. "Daniel and I were just close friends. We worked together every day. That hug, it was just. I was excited. That's all." I stared at her. "Excited about what?" She hesitated again. "The show went well tonight. We were relieved. It's just." I picked up the remote and rewound the video a few seconds. I paused on the frame where Daniel's hand was on the small of her back. "Do you always put your hands on your coworkers like this?" Her face turned pale. I let the silence hang between us. She exhaled sharply. "It's not an affair." I raised an eyebrow. "Then why do you look like a woman who just got caught?" Her breathing became uneven. "Because I know how this looks." "How does it look?" She swallowed. "It looks bad." "It is bad." Lisa pressed her fingers to her forehead, as if trying to collect herself. Then she tried again. "I swear, nothing serious is happening." "Nothing serious?" I repeated. "Define that for me." She hesitated. "I mean, it's not like we." I cut her off. "How long?" She blinked. "What? How long has this been going on?" Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. "There's nothing going on." I nodded slowly, then picked up my phone. I pulled up her call log. Turned the screen toward her. Her face drained of color. The most recent calls, Daniel Carter. Repeatedly. Late at night. Long conversations. I didn't say anything. I just let her look. Then I asked again. "How long?" Her lower lip trembled slightly. She knew she had lost control of the situation. I waited. Then, finally, she whispered. "A few months." I clenched my jaw, staring at the woman who had lied to me for months, who had just spent the last 5 minutes trying to convince me I was imagining things. Lisa's eyes were pleading now. "But I swear, I never meant for it to happen." I let out a slow, measured breath. "You never meant for it to happen," I repeated. She nodded desperately. "I love you." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling. Lisa was talking. I just wasn't listening anymore. Lisa sat frozen on the couch, her breath uneven, hands clenched together in her lap. She knew there was no way out of this now. No excuses, no half-truths would erase what I had seen with my own eyes. I let the silence stretch. I wanted to see what she would do when there was no easy escape. "I love you," she whispered again, her voice shaky. "Please believe that." I studied her face, the desperation in her eyes. It was strange, she had lied to me for months, but now she expected me to believe her words without question. I didn't respond. I stood up instead, walking slowly toward the kitchen. I needed distance. My hands were steady, but my pulse was pounding. Lisa stayed seated, watching me carefully. "Say something," she pleaded. I turned to face her. "What do you want me to say?" She swallowed hard. "I made a mistake." I exhaled through my nose, shaking my head. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the store." What you did wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Tears welled up in her eyes. It wasn't supposed to happen. Then explain how it did. She wiped at her face, her fingers trembling. We spent so much time together at work. It started off as nothing, just conversations, small things. Then it became more. I waited, giving her a chance to be honest for once. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered. But you did. Her face crumpled. I didn't think. No, you didn't think, I cut in. Because if you did, you would have stopped before it got this far. She pressed her hands to her temples, breathing hard. I was confused. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You weren't confused. You were selfish. She flinched. I didn't want to lose you. I leaned forward slightly. Then you shouldn't have thrown me away. Her shoulders shook. She wasn't even trying to defend herself anymore. There was nothing left to say. I pulled out my phone again, scrolling through her call log. You've been talking to him almost every night. She looked away. And you want me to believe this wasn't serious? I continued. She wiped at her face again. It didn't mean. Don't, I said sharply. Don't insult me by pretending he didn't mean something to you. Lisa let out a slow, shaky breath. It was never about replacing you. I stared at her. Then what was it about? She looked down at her lap, silent. I waited. Then she whispered, I don't know. I clenched my jaw. That's the best you can come up with? She wiped at her face again. I was stupid. I was reckless. But I swear, I never planned for this to happen. I exhaled, shaking my head. It doesn't matter if you planned it or not. You still did it. She reached forward, grabbing my hand, but I pulled away instantly. The hurt in her eyes was clear, but I didn't care. She didn't get to act like the victim here. I sat back down, rubbing a hand over my face. Did you sleep with him? Lisa's breath hitched. I turned to her sharply. Answer me. She hesitated, her fingers twisting together. Not in the way you think. I stared at her, unblinking. What does that mean? She swallowed. We kissed. A few times. I clenched my fists. You expect me to believe that's all it was? She shook her head quickly. I swear. I let out a slow breath. So, if that camera hadn't stayed on, would you have ever told me? She didn't answer. That's what I thought. She covered her mouth with her hands. I was going to end it. I tilted my head slightly. Before or after you got caught? She let out a soft sob, pressing her hands to her face. I didn't feel sympathy. You had every opportunity to stop, I said quietly. And you didn't. Lisa wiped at her tears, trying to compose herself. I don't want this to be the end of us. I laughed coldly. You think we still have an US? Her lip trembled. I don't want to lose you. You already did. The words landed like a weight between us. She inhaled sharply, her entire body shaking. I stood up, looking down at her. You don't get to sit there and beg for me to fix this. I'm not asking you to fix it, she whispered. You just don't want to deal with the consequences, I finished for her. She didn't argue. I grabbed my keys from the counter. I need space. She panicked instantly. Where are you going? I didn't answer. She stood up, reaching for me again, but I stepped back. Please don't leave, she said, her voice breaking. I exhaled, meeting her eyes. I'm not leaving. You are. Her face went pale. What? You're the one who broke this marriage, I said. You don't get to stay in this house like nothing happened. Tears slid down her cheeks, but I remained unmoved. Pack your things, I said simply. She stared at me, her hands shaking. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I'll be back in the morning, I said. Be gone by then. Lisa let out a choked sob, covering her face with her hands. But I didn't care anymore. I turned and walked out the door. I didn't look back. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the empty road ahead. The streetlights cast a dull glow over the asphalt, making everything look lifeless. I had left the house without a destination, without a plan, just the overwhelming need to be anywhere but there. I could still hear Lisa's voice in my head, breaking, pleading, trying to hold on to something that she had already destroyed. I wasn't angry in the way I thought I would be. The blind rage I had felt when I first saw the recording had faded into something colder, sharper. Clarity. I knew what needed to happen next. Lisa had to go. There was nothing left to discuss, no way to rebuild what she had broken. It was over. I checked the time. 11:52 p.m. I took a slow breath and pulled out my phone. No new messages from Lisa. Maybe she had finally accepted that this was happening. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't thought about in a long time. Josh. One of my oldest friends, someone I had drifted away from over the years. He had moved across town, but I knew he would pick up. He always did. The phone rang twice before he answered. Damn, man. Been a while. I exhaled. Yeah. I know it's late, but can I crash at your place for a night? Josh paused for half a second, then answered without hesitation. Of course. Everything all right? I let out a dry laugh. Not really. Come over. We'll talk. I didn't argue. I needed space, and right now, Josh's apartment was as good a place as any. When I arrived, Josh was already at the door, dressed in sweats and a hoodie. He took one look at my face and knew something was seriously wrong. He stepped aside, letting me in. Tell me. I walked into his living room, dropping my keys onto the coffee table. Lisa's been cheating on me. Josh's expression darkened immediately. Who? I sat down, leaning forward, my hands clasped. Daniel Carter. Josh blinked. The TV guy? I nodded. He let out a low whistle. Damn. That's unexpected. I caught them, I said. Live on air. Josh sat down across from me, shaking his head. How bad? I pulled out my phone and played the clip. Josh watched in silence. When the screen cut to black, he let out a slow breath. Yeah, he muttered. That's bad. I set my phone down. I told her to leave. Josh leaned back. And? She tried to lie. Said it wasn't serious, that she was going to end it. Josh snorted. Classic. I don't care what she says, I continued. She's done. I told her to be gone by the morning. Josh studied me for a moment. You sure about that? I looked at him. What do you mean? You've been with her for years, man, he said. Are you really ready to walk away? I didn't hesitate. Yes. Josh nodded. Good. We sat in silence for a few moments. Then he asked, what about him? I clenched my jaw. What about him? Josh shrugged. He knew she was married. And he still went for it. I let out a slow breath. Yeah. What are you gonna do about it? I exhaled through my nose, thinking. Daniel had gotten away with this too easily. He had done what he wanted without facing any real consequences. That didn't sit right with me. He has a career built on his image, I said slowly. Let's see how much he likes it when that image starts to crack. Josh raised an eyebrow. You have a plan? I unlocked my phone again. I still had access to Lisa's work accounts. She had used my laptop more than once to check her emails, and I had never logged out. I scrolled through her messages. And there it was. Evidence. Emails between her and Daniel. Private meetings. A hotel reservation, booked under a fake name but paid with her card. Josh leaned over, glancing at the screen. Damn. That's messy. Yeah. Are you gonna send it to someone? I thought about it. The network executives. A gossip site. His sponsors. Any of them would be interested in a scandal like this. But then, an idea came to me. A better one. I opened an anonymous email account and began typing. Subject: Your favorite TV host's private life. I attached the files. The screenshots. The proof. And I sent it. To every news outlet in the city. Josh let out a low whistle. You really did that. I put my phone down. Yeah. We sat there for a while, the weight of everything settling in. Josh didn't say much, he didn't need to. He had always been the kind of friend who let you process things at your own pace. Eventually, he stood up. You want a drink? I nodded. Yeah. Josh grabbed 2 beers from the fridge, handing me one. To moving forward. I clinked the bottle against his. To consequences. We drank in silence. Tomorrow, Lisa would wake up to a different world. And Daniel Carter? His perfect career was about to burn. The morning came fast. I barely slept, not because I was restless, but because I didn't need sleep. My mind was clear. There was no second guessing, no wondering if I had done the right thing. Lisa had made her choices. Daniel had made his. Now, they would deal with the fallout. I left Josh's apartment early, driving back home. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something immediately. Lisa's car was still there. She hadn't left. I exhaled slowly, gripping the steering wheel before stepping out. I had given her time. I had been more than fair. But clearly, she didn't understand that this was over. When I walked inside, she was sitting on the couch. She looked exhausted, like she had spent the entire night crying. Her bags were packed near the door, but she hadn't moved them. She looked up the moment I entered. I was waiting for you. I shut the door behind me. Why? She swallowed hard. I wanted to talk before I left. I crossed my arms. Talk about what? Her hands trembled slightly as she wiped at her face. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I don't want to leave things like this. I stared at her, unimpressed. You don't have a choice. She blinked rapidly, struggling to keep her emotions in check. I just want you to understand that it wasn't about you. I laughed under my breath. It was about me, Lisa. You just didn't care. Tears welled in her eyes. I did care. No, I interrupted. You cared about yourself. You cared about how Daniel made you feel. You cared about the thrill, the secrecy, whatever it was you got out of it. But you didn't care about me. She opened her mouth, then shut it again. She knew I was right. A few moments passed before she finally spoke again. Where do we go from here? I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. There is no we anymore, Lisa. You know that. She pressed her hands together in her lap, nodding slowly. Do you hate me? I didn't answer immediately. I thought about it. No, I said finally. I don't hate you. I just don't respect you anymore. She flinched, but she didn't argue. I glanced at the bags near the door. Are you leaving, or do I need to make you? Lisa let out a shaky breath, standing up. She walked toward her things, picking up her suitcase. For a moment, she hesitated, like she was expecting me to say something, to stop her. I didn't. She walked past me, her steps slow, hesitant. At the door, she turned back. I know you won't believe me, but I really did love you. I didn't react. I just watched as she stepped outside and closed the door behind her. She was gone. I stood there for a moment, absorbing the silence. Then, I sat down, pulling out my phone. I wasn't surprised to see a flood of notifications. The emails I had sent last night had done their job. Multiple news sites had picked up the story. Daniel Carter exposed, TV host's secret relationship with married producer. Headlines were everywhere. People were already tearing him apart in the comment sections. Sponsors were pulling out. The network was reviewing the situation. I scrolled through everything, reading every article, every reaction. Then, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I didn't need to guess who it was. I let it ring. I let it go to voicemail. Then I blocked the number. Daniel Carter didn't exist to me anymore. The house was quiet. Too quiet. For the first time in years, there was no sound of Lisa's footsteps in the hallway, no clatter of her setting down her purse, no soft hum of her voice as she moved through the space we had once shared. It was just me now. Just the aftermath of everything that had happened. I sat on the couch, my phone still in my hand, staring at the screen. The notifications kept coming, more articles, more fallout. Daniel Carter's career was unraveling in real time. His network had officially suspended him, pending an investigation. His social media pages were flooded with backlash. Some people defended him, of course. There were always those types. But the majority? They hated him. I locked my phone and set it down on the coffee table. I had gotten what I wanted. Lisa was gone. Daniel's life was in shambles. The world knew what kind of people they were. So why did I still feel this emptiness? Not sadness. Not regret. Just a void where something used to be. I stood up and walked to the bedroom. Lisa had taken most of her things, but a few remnants remained: a hairbrush on the dresser, a pair of shoes she had forgotten in the corner. I picked them up, tossing them into a trash bag. I didn't want any part of her left in this house. The closet was half empty now. It looked wrong, unbalanced. I sat on the edge of the bed, running a hand over my face. I should have felt relief. And in a way, I did. But there was something else beneath it, something harder to define. Maybe it was the weight of wasted years. I had given so much to Lisa. Time. Love. Loyalty. And in the end, none of it had mattered. She had thrown it all away for something fleeting, something she didn't even bother to fight for. I had spent years thinking we were building something real. That we were working toward a future. But that future had never existed. I grabbed my phone again, scrolling through my contacts. I hovered over Lisa's name. Then, without hesitation, I deleted it. She was a chapter that didn't need revisiting. I moved to Daniel Carter's social media page. His latest post was filled with thousands of comments, most of them brutal. His perfect image, his carefully crafted reputation, had crumbled overnight. I thought about what Lisa had said before she left. I know you won't believe me, but I really did love you. I had felt nothing when she said it. Now, sitting here, alone in the house we had once shared, I still felt nothing. Maybe that was the real victory. I had moved past her before she even walked out the door. I stood up, grabbed the trash bag filled with the last of her things, and walked outside. The sun was up now, the world moving on as if nothing had happened. I tossed the bag into the garbage bin, shutting the lid with finality. Then, without looking back, I walked inside and closed the door behind me. Lisa was gone. Daniel was finished. And I was free.